beautiful.
Wow, thank you so very much for the warm welcome. I'm so honored and delighted to be here. I'm so excited to be here. And I just want to clarify one thing. I guess Ray Hanna did not read the Southern Poverty Law Center article about this event and me. I don't know if you got the memo, but I'm a white supremacist anti-Semite. I guess the SPLC missed my beautiful skin and my big lips, and I'm a proud Zionist, and I guess they missed that. So we are here together. This is like a family reunion. Really, when people, oh, there's my brother John. Hey, John Hajar, I know you're hiding back there. My Lebanese brother over there. You know, we're all cousins in the diaspora. But it is truly, this is like a family reunion being here. Where people like us who love Israel, who love America, can come together, who are unapologetically Zionist and patriotic Americans who love Israel, who love America, who are fighting for the soul and the survival of Western civilization, which is under attack today. So it is such an honor to be here. People ask me all the time, Brigitte, don't you get depressed traveling, talking about radical Islam and terrorism all the time and fighting the terrorists? And I tell them, of course I do. I'm a human just like you. But what keeps me so energized is when I travel our amazing country and meet people like you who take the time out of their busy schedule on a Sunday afternoon and come here to hear me speak and be with me. And I truly appreciate it. So thank you for honoring me with your presence. And I have to tell you, when you are in a position of leadership, it's very lonely on the top. Very lonely. Because at the end of the day, when you go back to your room and you're sitting in your office making the difficult decisions, and you are privy to so much information, but everybody in the world knows exactly what you are supposed to do. Because they can do it better, or they know better, or you're not doing it the way it should be done. I know a lot of people involved in many organizations, if you've ever been in a position of leadership, know exactly what I'm talking about. As a matter of fact, right before I came to this room, I was in my hotel room, and I was checking my emails, and somebody who's actually a member of Act for America, who heard me speak 2 days ago in Florida, in Miami, sent me a whole list of proposals, and he was so upset that I was not doing them, and I needed to do them, and he knew better. But I want you to remember one thing when you're looking at people of leadership, and I guess I'm speaking to a family right now because I just had to get it off my chest. When you're talking to people of leadership, just remember, they are isolated, they have to make the difficult decisions, they receive the death threats, the hate mail, the insults, and while all the people can see only the tip of the iceberg, the leader sees the iceberg under the water and know exactly what they're dealing with. And they have to make the difficult decisions, and they have to live with them. And I believe every single one of us here today is a leader. No matter what role you play in whatever organizations you are involved with, and that's the reason why you are here today. Every single one of you will be attacked by your friends or your family. Hey, Thanksgiving is coming up. Get ready. Put your armor on. Everybody's going to argue with you. Don't talk politics. But every single one of you, as long as you hold to your conviction, as long as you hold to your truth, that you know it's the truth and it's the right thing to do, move forward in being engaged and being involved and doing exactly what you know is your purpose and your destiny and the passion that you have to make a difference in this world. Don't let ever anybody discourage you from what you're doing. Don't ever let any attack coming against you take you down. I am here today as the ultimate example about the triumph of the human spirit. And I'm going to share this with you not as an activist, my story, because I'm going to share the activism part, but also the personal human part and how I arrived to where I am today. Most of you don't realize or don't even remember, I was in Boston the first time in 2003. I was actually in Boston for a rally that we did in City Hall, where a friend of mine emailed me and he said, we need you in Boston. We are holding a rally for Israel rally. There is this bus, a bombed out bus that John Mitchell, I think was his name. Jim Hutchins was bringing it around, showing it, and they were showing it in Boston. And all the anti-Israel haters are out there. So, of course, I buy the cheapest ticket possible. I get on a plane at 6 o'clock. I land, I think, in Boston at 8 o'clock or something like that. And I remember coming to City Hall, taking a taxi, and sitting by myself. The rally didn't start till later. Nobody knew who I am. I'm sitting in the shade on the steps by myself. And I think some lady ends up coming and sitting next to me. I think her name is Lana Friedman or something like that. She was running for office, and we got talking. I spoke on stage. The rally started. Charles Jacob at that time didn't even know who I was. I remember standing in the audience looking at him. He was the big deal. You know, I looked at I want to say the David Project. Help me out.
Yes,
Right, so I looked at Charles, and Charles was like, wow, what he was doing with the students on college campuses. And I just idealized him. He didn't even know who I was, didn't even say hello to me. I forgive you. Where's Charles? I forgive you, I forgive you. So at the end, we had the Israelis screaming at us, not Israelis, but Jewish people, remember, yelling at us because they did not believe Israel has a right to exist. They were actually on the side of the Iranians and the mullahs and the Palestinians. So not only we were fighting, the enemy who was against us, we were fighting our own people, the Jewish people who did not believe that Israel should exist as a Jewish state. And so we ended up the rally, and Richard Landis at the time, and I'm not sure if Richard is still even in Boston, was by myself waiting for a taxi to take me back to the airport, and Richard invites me to his home. I had not eaten lunch. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We had a lot of Russian Jews that were passing bagels, but I stood there very polite, didn't say a word, and I ended up going to Richard's home, having a bite, and then he took me to the airport. That was my first visit to Boston. That was the activist Bridget Gabriel at the beginning, where nobody even knew my name, but I knew what my purpose was. See, it doesn't matter whether somebody knows your name. You are part of a chain, and that chain is all linked together in our love for Israel. No matter what continent we live on, no matter what religious background we come from, we share a passion, and we are part of a big movement, and every single one of us plays an important part in that. I ended up leaving, but my activism grew and grew and grew. At that time, I was here under ACT, American Congress for Truth, when I started. But I knew very early on, after September 11th, what I'm supposed to do. And for those of you who do not know my story, who hear me for the first time today, allow me to share with you a little bit about my background as to where this passion comes from. I was born and raised in Lebanon, which used to be the only majority Christian country in the Middle East. We were open-minded, we were fair, we were tolerant, we were multicultural. We prided ourselves on our multiculturalism. We had open border policy. We welcomed everyone into our country because we wanted to share with them the westernization which we had created in the heart of the Middle East. We had the best universities in the Middle East. Muslims used to send their children to study in our universities. They graduated and worked in our economy because we had the best economy in the Middle East, even though we did not have any oil. By the mid-60s, Beirut became known as Paris of the Middle East. Lebanon was the Switzerland of the Middle East. And this is the country I was born into. Things were fine. Everybody was great. The Christians were the majority. The Muslims were the minority. But as the years went by, we Christians shrunk, and the Muslims had a lot of children. And they started growing and growing and growing. And by the 70s, or by the mid-60s, when I was born, Lebanon became majority Muslim. But the situation was controlled until the influx of the Palestinians out of Jordan, where King Hussein kicked them out, and Lebanon was the only Christian country in the Middle East, well, we are the only Christian country in the Middle East, or were, to accept the third wave of Palestinian refugees into the country, while none of their Arab brethren wanted to take them. We took them in, being a country that is fair and tolerant and loving and majority Christian based on Judeo-Christian values. We took them in, they put their heads together with the Muslims and declared jihad on the Christians. Yasser Arafat wanted to create a base from which to fight the Jews, kill them, and throw them into the sea, something he tried to do in Jordan but failed. But he was able to use Lebanese democracy, Lebanese open-mindedness, Lebanese tolerance, Lebanese multiculturalism to topple our democracy and destroy us. The war started in 1974. We stopped traveling. I was a little girl. I'm an only child to my parents, and every holiday we used to go to Beirut for Christmas, where the majority of my family lived. And we stopped traveling, and I would ask my parents, how come we're not going to Beirut this Christmas? And my father would give me some lame excuse as to why we're not going. And I learned later that the reason we stopped going is because the Palestinians would set up a fly-by-night checkpoints, and they would stop cars traveling. And they would look at people's IDs, because you see in Lebanon, our religion is written on our national ID. You are either a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew. So when they see that this is a Christian family traveling, they would get them out of their cars and shoot them in cold blood. It became known as identity killing at the time. Thomas Friedman writes about it in his book, From Beirut to Jerusalem. By 1975, we became prisoners to our homes and our towns. My 9/11 happened to me in 1975, when radical Islamists, which is the combined forces of the Palestinians and the Lebanese Muslims, came together and started bombing us. They bombed my home, bringing it down, burying me under the rubble, wounded, as they shouted, Allahu Akbar. I ended up in a hospital for 2.5 months. And I would ask my father, why did they do this to us? As I was taken from one surgery to another, hooked to IVs in both arms, why did they do this to us? And my father would tell me, because we are Christians, the Muslims consider us infidels and they want to kill us. So I learned since I was a 10-year-old little girl that I am wanted dead simply because I was born into the Christian faith and lived in a Christian town. Whether I practiced my religion or not, it was irrelevant in my enemy's eyes. I belonged to that group, and that's why we were killed. Actually, in the Middle East, when you are raised as a child, no matter what your religion is, whether you are a Jew, a Muslim, or a Christian, you are raised with this phrase, أولاً يأتي السبت وبعده الأحد. First comes Saturday, then comes Sunday. Meaning first we kill the Jews, then we come for the Christians. We heard that growing up. After the bombing of my house, our life was turned upside down. I ended up leaving the hospital with my parents, and I came home. But my home was no longer the home I left. I ended up living with my parents in an 8x10 bomb shelter underground, without electricity, without water, and very little food. And that's where I lived for the next 7 years of my life, robbed of my youth. And you know what the irony is? You know how we built our bomb shelter? The Lebanese government came to the homes in southern Lebanon telling them that Jews want to kill you and we want to protect you, and therefore we're giving you money if you would match the other half so you can build bomb shelters, so when the Jews come to slaughter you, you'll be able to hide in your bomb shelters. The bomb shelter in which I lived in was partly funded by the Lebanese government to protect me from the Jews who later saved my life from my own Lebanese government. We ended up living in that bomb shelter for 7 years. To get some food, we'd crawl out under the bombs, and we would dig out dandelion, hindbi. John knows exactly what that means. And we would dig out dandelions and different vegetation that grew around my bomb shelter because it was the only greenery we had to eat. To get some water, we would crawl under snipers' bullets because we were surrounded with snipers shooting at us. To get some water, and every time before we left our bomb shelter, we would say our last goodbyes because we did not know if we are going to come back alive or dead, just to get a drink of water. And we would get to the spring. My mother would use her stocking on top of the gallon of water to catch all the rocks and all the junk so we can drink the water. We lived in the mountains. Marjayoun was in the mountains, and it was very cold in the wintertime, and we didn't have any heat. And my father would go out and he would break twigs from the trees around our bomb shelter and bring them in. And he would pour mazout or benzene or kerosene on the twigs and light a fire so we can warm up. And we would huddle around the fire. And we didn't have any ventilation in our bomb shelter. We had one door leading into the bomb shelter. And we had an agreement every night that whoever woke up first, because many nights we would pass out because of carbon monoxide poisoning. We had an agreement, whoever woke up first would drag the other two outside. It was me and my parents in the bomb shelter, all three of us. and slap on the face so we can wake up because of the carbon monoxide poisoning. And this became my life. And I remember when we went into the bomb shelter, my father would say, it's only going to be a 2-week ordeal because all the world great Christian countries are going to see what's happening in Lebanon with all the massacres that we were experiencing. Because you see the Palestinians, the combined forces of the Palestinians and Muslims formed their own army called Jaysh Libnan al-Arabi, the Arabic Lebanese army, and started massacring the Christians. One of the most famous massacres in Lebanon is the massacre of the Moor, where they went in, the Christians hid in churches thinking they're going to be safe. The Muslims went in and started massacring the Christians. They committed monstrosities that were seldom reported in the world media because the media was located in West Beirut, the area that was controlled by Yasser Arafat, which is, by the way, now controlled by Hezbollah in Ad-Dahiya in West Beirut. They would commit massacres that were seldom reported in the mainstream media or in any media. They would walk into a bomb shelter. They would find a mother and a father hiding with a little baby in a bomb shelter. They would take the baby, tie one leg of the child, of the baby to the mother and another leg to the father, and pull the parents apart, splitting the child in half. They used to massacre and crucify the Christians. It's important for you to hear those words, as difficult as they are, from an eyewitness to terror who lived to tell about it. Because right now we hear about the Yazidis and we hear about what's happening to those people in the Middle East. But all we hear about it is words in the news. In Lebanon, in the Moor, they used to take the Christian men and crucify them on crosses and then put honey on their chests so they would be stung by bees as they died. And when a man would die, they would bring him down, cut his genital and stick it in his mouth, and cut a knife on his chest, drawing the cross. ISIS did not invent anything new. ISIS is repeating monstrosities that Islamists have been committing in the Middle East for generation after generation after generation after generation. My father would say to me, we're going to survive because they're not going to be able to get to us. America is going to come and save the Christians. France is going to come and save the Christians. Britain is going to come save the Christians. Australia, Canada is going to come. And we waited and we waited and we waited and nobody came. We were the forgotten ones. It's like right now. I mean, how much really did you do to save the Yazidis today? How much did you hear about the Yazidis on the news today? What about all these women in captivity? What ever happened to bring back our girls in Nigeria? When was last time you heard anything about that? I was one of the forgotten people in the Middle East. And that's why you hear the fire within to stand up against evil. 3 years into our ordeal, a friend of ours stopped by one day and he said, Brigitte, I just want you to know that we heard a lot of chatter on the radios. And we heard that we're going to be attacked tonight. And he said, if I don't see you tomorrow, I wish you a merciful death. And he left. And I remember dressing in my Sunday best, my Easter dress, because I wanted to look pretty when I am dead, knowing that when they come to slaughter me, there would be no one to bury me. And I sobbed as I begged my mother, I don't want to die. I'm only 13 years old. I don't want to die. Please do something. And there was nothing my mother could say to me. And we sat in the corner of our bomb shelter, my parents and I. And my father opened up the Bible and started reading from Psalms. I shall walk into the valley of death and fear no evil, for thou art with me. And they started praying, he and my mom. And they looked at me and they said, when they come to slaughter us tonight, we will create a distraction. We just want you to run towards Israel and don't look back. You see, I lived 5 kilometers from the Israeli border. And we knew if we run to the Jews and beg for help, the Jews are not going to slaughter us because we had more shared values with them than we had with the Muslims. And we were surrounded to be slaughtered. And I told my parents, how can I do this? How can I leave you? They said, you are a young child who lived a long life. Run towards Israel and never look back. Thank God I didn't have to make that difficult decision that night. Because that's the night when Israel came in physically into Lebanon and established the security zone in Operation Litani in 1978 and set up artillery bases around the hills of our town to keep us alive. And this is how we survived for another 5 years until 1982 when Israel invaded Lebanon. And the only reason Israel invaded Lebanon, because at that time, Syria had troops inside Lebanon, and Syria was using Lebanese territory, shelling Israel, all the northern towns of Israel, to the point where all the northern towns in Israel, Kiryat Shmona, Metula, all these people lived in bomb shelters just like us. Their lives ceased to exist. So Israel, working with the Christian Lebanese, trying to help the Christians take back their country, take back their democracy, and kick out the radical Islamic element that had taken control of the country at that time, Israel invaded Lebanon, working with the Christians, moving forward to kick out the Palestinians out of Lebanon at that time. And Israel was able to get Yasser Arafat all the way to Beirut and kick him out to Tunisia. And this is how we came out of the bomb shelter and back to rebuilding our lives. At that time, I knew Israel was saving our lives, because Israel was the only country that came to help the Christians in South Lebanon in the security zone. Israel, anybody who needed medication would go to Israel for treatment. Whether you needed a heart transplant, a brain surgery, or you just had a cold, you needed to go see a doctor. You got treated free of charge. Israel would bring food to the military, would bring food to the children. Israel would take the Christian men into Israel and train them how to fight. A lot of the Christian Maronites were trained in Israel how to fight. And this is how we lasted all these years during the war. Because we were the educated ones. We were not the street kids. We didn't know how to fight. And one thing we learned in Lebanon, you can have all your professional degrees on the wall hanging behind you. Your medical degree, your law degree, your accounting degree, your whatever degree. None of that will do you diddly squat, as they say in Texas, when you are faced with an enemy bent on killing you in the name of Allah. During the Israeli invasion, my mother became wounded by a Muslim shell exploding in front of our bomb shelter as the Muslims were running frantically retrieving. My mother got wounded and we had to take her to Israel for treatment. For my mother, it was a life-saving experience. But for me, it was a life-changing experience. My father, before we left the bomb shelter, gave me $60 he had hidden in a mattress. And he said to me, here is some money since you're going to go to Israel in case you need it. And I remember touching money for the first time, because when you live in a bomb shelter, what do you need money for? And I took that money and put it in my pocket. And we went up to the bombed out version of a Lebanese hospital. Israel had fixed up one room, put an Israeli soldier on duty who was a doctor with 2 nurses to give people first aid when they got wounded. And they gave my mother aid. They put her in an Israeli donated ambulance to drive us to Israel, to take her to a hospital in Israel. The Lebanese driver knew my parents. It was a 10-minute drive. He drove us to the border. When they took my mother out of the ambulance, put her inside another ambulance inside Israel to take her to the nearest hospital, the Tzfat hospital in northern Israel. The Lebanese taxi chauffeur, the driver of the ambulance, walked around the ambulance and asked me if I had any money. He needed the fee for the ambulance ride. And I said, sure, how much do you need? And like an innocent 17-year-old, I took out all the money in my hand and I showed it to him. And I said, how much do I owe you? And he looked at my money and he said, give me $30, which was half the money I had for the 10-minute ride. I said, sure, thank you very much. I appreciate it. We sat inside another Israeli ambulance inside Israel, and this time the driver was an Israeli soldier. He was pulled into Miloyim, the reserve, 12 hours earlier. They put my mother in the back, and this man drove us to Tzfat, which was an hour drive from the border. And I thought to myself, my gosh, I don't think I'm going to have enough money for this ride. We got into the emergency area of Tzfat hospital. They took my mother out of the ambulance, and I walked around the ambulance to the Israeli driver, asking him, how much do I owe you? And he looked at me and he said, what is this for? And I said, this is the fee for the ambulance ride. He said to me, you don't owe me anything. This is a free service from us to you. Keep your money and take good care of your mother. I wish her a speedy recovery, and take good care of yourself. I was so touched. I was so moved. I thought to myself, what an ethical man. What an honest man, a man of integrity. This man could have taken my money and partied all night, and I would not have known the difference. I would have been grateful for him only taking $30 for the 1 hour ride, considering I paid $30 for a 10-minute ride. And then I became angry because I realized the Lebanese driver who actually knew my parents basically robbed me, took advantage of me. That was my first lesson in the difference between the Arabic culture and the Israeli culture. We got into the emergency room, and there were hundreds of people wounded on the floor. There were Lebanese Christians brought in from Lebanon. There were Lebanese Muslims brought in from Lebanon. Palestinian terrorists brought in. Israeli soldiers wounded in the war brought in. And I couldn't believe my eyes. I thought to myself, I can understand why the Israelis are helping me, but why on earth are they helping the Palestinians and the Muslims who would slit their throat in 30 seconds if they get a chance to? But little did I know about the values of the Israeli soldiers and the Israeli doctor and the Israeli culture. The doctor treated my mother before he treated the Israeli soldier laying next to her. They didn't see nationality. They didn't see political affiliation. They did not see anything. They saw people in need and they helped. They took my mother to the 4th floor of that hospital, and they put her in a room with another 1 Druze woman and 1 Muslim woman that were brought in from Lebanon earlier that day. And we were not in the room but maybe 5 minutes. And I heard all this commotion outside our window, outside our balcony. And people were running from the nurses' station through our room out to the balcony to see what was happening down below. And I walked out to see what was going on. And 2 Israeli helicopters had just landed, bringing in wounded Israeli soldiers who were wounded in the war in Lebanon, taking them out on stretchers, one after another, into the emergency room. And I stood on that balcony feeling sick to my stomach, feeling out of place, feeling brokenhearted, feeling humiliated, feeling embarrassed after all these people are wounded with the war, because of the war in my country. I didn't make eye contact with anybody standing next to me, and I was surrounded by parents of Israeli soldiers wounded in the hospital, by husbands, by wives, by daughters, by sisters, by brothers. And I didn't make eye contact because I did not know how they're going to feel about me standing there. I kept looking down, and all of a sudden I felt the tapping on my shoulder. And an Israeli nurse was standing next to me. And she said, "You are new here, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes. They just brought in my mother. She's in this room." And she looked at me and she put her arm around me and she said, "Don't worry. We'll take good care of her. She's going to be just fine. And if you need anything, just call my name. My name is Leah." And I will never forget that name. I started crying. I started crying because for the first time in my life, I experienced civilization. I experienced a human quality that I knew did not exist in my culture. I experienced compassion. I knew for a fact, if I was a Jew standing in any 4th floor of any Arabic hospital in any country in the Middle East, I would be lynched and thrown to my death as shouts of Allahu Akbar will echo through the hospital and down the surrounding streets. I learned very quickly that the Arabs are fed a fabricated lie about the Jews that is so far from reality. I knew for a fact that these Jewish people were able to love and forgive their enemy, the Palestinians, in a way I wasn't able to, and I was the Christian who was taught to love like Jesus taught. I ended up in that hospital for 22 days. Those days changed my life, changed the way I watch television, changed the way I read newspaper, changed the way I listen to the news on the radio. I became close friends with parents of the Israeli soldiers wounded in the hospital. My mother was going from one surgery to another. Potashnik from Pardes Khana, Israel. Her only son, Amir, was wounded, severely wounded in the hospital. And she became like my surrogate mother. Their room was just a few rooms down from my mom. And I became close friends with Rina. And I would spend a lot of time in her room. And one day, the Israeli National Band came to play songs to lift the spirits of the Israeli soldiers in the hospital. And they would play songs like Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, the song the music that was played when we were collecting the offering. And I wish you sang the song when you were instead of just playing the music. And I felt so out of place. And I started walking out because I did not want Rina to feel uncomfortable with me being in the room. After all, her son is wounded in the war in my country. And without skipping a beat, Rina holds me by my hand and pulls me back in. And she says, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. And we both stood there crying. We both were victims of a vicious cycle of hatred against both of us as Christians and Jews. And we listened to the Israeli band playing these songs crying. And I realized the difference between Israel and the Arabic world is a difference between civilization and barbarism. It's a difference between goodness and evil. I had to go back to Lebanon that day because I'm an only child to my parents, and my parents were elderly. But I vowed that one day I will return to Israel, that one day I would live amongst those people whose values I respected, whose character I admired. I wanted to be like them. And I was so thankful and so grateful and blessed to be able to return to Israel in 1984 and work in Jerusalem as news anchor for World News in the Middle East, based in Binyanei HaUmah in Jerusalem. And that's where I worked from 1984 till 1989 before I came to the United States. And as I worked as a news anchor in Jerusalem, I started reporting on world events, obviously every night on the evening news. And as I read the stories happening around the world, that's when we started seeing a true rise of global Islamic terrorism. And I started realizing that it didn't matter what country the terrorist attack happened to be at, the name of the perpetrators were the same. Ahmed, Muhammad, Hussein, Ali. The name of the victims were always Westerners, Christians and Jews. Terry Waite, Terry Anderson, Colonel Higgins, the Achille Lauro, the TWA flight, the Pan Am flights. I can go on and on. As a matter of fact, in my first book titled Because They Hate, if you haven't read it, you should, I list pages upon pages upon pages of all the terrorist attacks against America, where America hit the snooze button and went back to sleep. And I realized that what I used to think was a regional problem between a majority Muslim Middle East trying to either kill or expel the minority Christians and Jews had become a worldwide problem. But the world was not connecting the dots. The world lacked imagination. And isn't this exactly what the 9/11 Commission report said to us? We lacked imagination. It's not that we did not know that the terrorists want to attack us or they hate us. We have never been faced with an enemy that is so direct, doesn't beat around the bush, doesn't lie, tell us exactly why they hate us, how they hate us, what they want to do to us, how they want to kill us. We choose to ignore them. America was attacked the first time, the World Trade Center in 1993. America was attacked again with the Kubar Towers in 1995. America was attacked when they attacked our embassies in Kenya and Tanzania in 1997. They attacked the USS Cole in 2000. And then they were so confident that we were so asleep and so apathetic that they came back and re-attacked the World Trade Center the second time in 2001, and this time they brought the buildings down. Attacked the Pentagon and killed almost 3,000 Americans on that day. We lacked imagination. Well, today, 16 years later, we cannot say we lack imagination. Iran says they want to wipe Israel off the map. You better believe it. They live, breathe, organize, dream about, do everything they can, count the seconds to be able to finish their bomb so they can wipe Israel off the map. And by the way, Israel is the little Satan. America is the great Satan. We are both a target. And not just from Iran, but from all the different radical Islamic organizations popping everywhere around the world. You let me know how much I have because I know I can lose track of time. Okay. Keep on going. Oh, I like the support. My, oh my. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I believe right now we are fighting for our survival. And I mean our, as in Israel and America. Our survival right now. So why should we be concerned about what's happening around the world and why we can no longer say we lack imagination? It's because we have evidence in front of our own eyes as to how they are organizing to kill us. Many of you have heard about the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood is the oldest Islamic terrorist organization in the world, founded in Egypt in 1928, with 70 offshoot Islamic terrorist organizations operating around the world, including Hamas, Al-Qaeda, and now ISIS. So why should we be concerned about the Muslim Brotherhood? Because the Muslim Brotherhood wrote a plan in 1982, a 100-year plan for radical Islam to infiltrate and dominate the West and establish an Islamic government on earth. In the counterterrorism circles, this plan became known as the Project, the Muslim Brotherhood Project. What makes the Muslim Brotherhood Project so unique is they give tactics and proposals as to how to infiltrate the West, how to use our laws against us, how to use our open-mindedness against us. They talk about how to use certain terms which disarms Westerners, terms such as, quote, multiculturalism, diversity, interfaith, tolerance. They say you use these terms, you'll have Westerners lapping from the palm of your hands like dogs. Boy, do they know us. Do they know our culture? They talk about how to set up non-profit organizations and human rights organizations and adopt very vague, multicultural names to maintain the appearance of moderation in the West in order to advance the radical Islamic agenda. They talk about how to set up community centers in the inner cities and use them as recruiting centers so they can get people engaged and involved. They talk about how to get democratically elected Muslims on all levels in the West, including government, NGOs, etc. They talk about how to get interns in different governmental offices in the West, Muslim interns, so they can have an insider view as to how policy is done and made at the highest levels. They talk about how to work with like-minded progressive organizations that share similar goals. This is why when you see the ACLU working with CARE, for example, you scratch your head and you think to yourself, how can these two people have anything in common? But the ACLU and the ADL and the AJC and the SPLC are used as the useful idiots at the hands of people like CARE. So why should we be concerned about the Muslim Brotherhood? Because they wrote the plan for the destruction of America. The plan was written in 1992. Here is the plan for the destruction of the United States of America. The plan is titled مذكرة تفسيرية للهدف الاستراتيجي العام للجماعة في أمريكا الشمالية. You all got that? There will be a quiz in the question-answer session. It means an explanatory memorandum for the strategic goal for the brothers in North America written 5/22/1991, 10 years prior to September 11th. But I'm going to read you only one paragraph out of that plan to give you an idea how clear and direct and concise and focused and crystallized goals our enemies have. Here's what they talk about. Here's the title out of page 7 out of 18. Understanding the role of the Muslim brother in North America. The process of settlement is a civilization jihadist process with all the word means. The Ikhwan, which is the Arabic word for brothers, must understand that their work in America is a kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying the Western civilization from within and sabotaging, and they put that in quotes, its miserable house by their hands, meaning our hands, and the hands of the believers, meaning al-Ikhwan al-Muslimin, the Muslim brothers, so that it is eliminated and Allah's religion is made victorious over all other religions. They don't beat around the bush. They don't mince words. The next paragraph's title is understanding that we cannot perform the settlement mission by ourselves or away from people. Remember, they want to destroy our house by our own miserable hands. So they need other people more than just the Islamic community to accomplish the goal. In the paragraph, they continue with their instructions, and I quote, "We must possess a mastery of the art of coalitions, the art of absorption, and the principles of cooperation." What are you seeing right now? You are seeing Linda Sarsour coming together, working with ADL and the AJC and the SPLC and the ACLU and MoveOn.org and CARE. So you've got all these organizations now coming together, marching together lockstep. Why? Because they're marching for human rights, right? For civil liberties, right? That's exactly, I mean, they're reading it literally, the instruction out of their plan. But the most important page of this plan, by the way, this plan is on our website, actforamerica.org. You can print it for yourself in English and in Arabic. It's under the Muslim Brotherhood tab. But the most important page out of this plan is the last page. By the way, this plan was admitted as evidence in the largest terrorism trial, financing trial ever in the history of the United States, where our government handed down 108 guilty verdicts to Muslim Americans and Muslim American organizations raising money in the United States to the tune of millions and sending it overseas to support terrorism. The majority of the money was raised on $165 increments, which is the price of a suicide belt for a suicide bomber. This is where they raise the money and how. So, who are some of these unindicted co-conspirators? What are the names? In the last page of this plan, they list 29 front organizations set up in America for the destruction of America from within. And here they are. By the way, we're not talking military here. We're talking, remember, civic organizations, etc. Number one on the list is ISNA, Islamic Society of North America. If that sounds familiar to you, it's because they were advisors to President Obama about Middle East policy. The president of ISNA is the one who wrote President Obama's speech, which he delivered in Cairo. Remember the big first famous speech to the Arabic world? The president of ISNA wrote that speech. Number two on the list is MSA, the Muslim Student Association. The Muslim Student Association has more chapters on American college campuses than the Democrats and the Republicans combined. Number 8 on the list is NATE, the North American Islamic Trust. NATE owns over 90% of mosques in the United States. Number 22 on the list is IAP, Islamic Association for Palestine, which later became CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations. This is how organized they are. They have an organization for every segment of our society. Media, publishing, think tanks, you name it, politics, you name it. This is how detailed they are. And at this point, I want to talk a little bit about education, because I know Charles mentioned education and Andrea here with camera, and I want to focus about how important what's happening in our school system right now is. I'm going to talk about colleges real fast, and then I'm going to get into what's happening in public schools. As I mentioned, this plan was written in 1991. So in 1991, the Islam Project was launched. And under the Islam Project, Muslims started pumping millions of dollars into our universities, setting up Middle East study departments and political science departments, and appointing Arab professors who are anti-Israel, anti-America, to teach the students that Israel is evil, America is bad, and the Islamic world is the underdog. And here's the extent of the peddling that had taken place on our college campuses. $20 million was donated from the King of Saudi Arabia to the University of Arkansas to set up a Middle East study department. $22 million was donated to Harvard University from 2 Saudi sheikhs linked to Al-Qaeda. 22 million. You wonder why Ahmadinejad was invited here again and again and again? On 9/11, no less. Remember that year where he spoke here on 9/11? 28.1 million donated to Georgetown, 5 million to MIT, 1.5 million to Texas A&M, 5 million to Rutgers University, 5 million to Columbia University. Other recipients of Saudi-tainted monies include UC Santa Barbara, Johns Hopkins University, Duke University, American University, UCLA, Howard University, and many, many more. You get the idea. You get the idea. The strategy worked so well on college campuses that they decided, why wait until the kids get to college? Why don't we start with them in middle and high school? This way, by the time they get to college, they are 18 years old and they vote. So they started providing, the Islam Project started providing consultants to America's top publishers on how to teach Islam in the public school system in the United States. And they started providing trainers. One of the most famous teacher trainers is Susan Douglas, who is married to a Saudi man, was a teacher at the Saudi Academy in Northern Virginia. She trained over 100,000 teachers in our public school systems nationwide on how to teach the Islam Project, the Islam curriculum. They introduced the Islam curriculum, which is a 3-week course where the students had to recite and memorize verses from the Quran, adopt Islamic names, dressed as Muslims if they want to kind of get in that field of what it's like to be a Muslim, fast for Ramadan so they experience what it's like to be a Muslim, and go on a field trip to a mosque near them to see how Muslims worship. Now, when I started talking about this in 2008, after my second book came out, people would say to me, oh, Brigitte, you're exaggerating. That couldn't possibly be true because we have separation of church and state in the United States. And I learned very quickly, here is the plan. Here is the course. This is the course that is provided to teachers that the parents will never ever see, and it's not sent home with the kids, but this is the course that is provided to teachers for their training. It's put out by a company called Interact Publishing out of California. This course began being taught in California in 1991, 10 years prior to September 11th. Right now, this course is taught nationwide in every single public school and private school in the United States because the books that are being taught in these schools are approved by the State Board of Education, and they get their books, like history books and social studies books, from America's top publishers like Houghton Mifflin, McGraw-Hill, Random House, etc. But I'm going to focus on this course right now. It's titled the Islam Course. And I'm going to just read you a couple pages, paragraphs from a couple pages to see what Charles was referring to when talking about what Camera is doing, what they are doing, Citizens for Peace and Tolerance, and what Act for America is doing in your community about the textbooks. Here's a course about Islam. The teacher starts her instructions with, from the beginning, you and your classmates will become Muslims. You will be a member of a caravan starting from a training center based around an Islamic city. The teacher continues her instructions, or his instruction, by saying, dressing as a Muslim and trying to be involved will increase your learning and enjoyment. Finally, trying your best at all tasks will guarantee you an excellent grade and a more enjoyable time. So as you can see, the teacher is already dangling the great carrot in front of the students. We know that this worked very well on college campuses. Remember what they do to the students on college campus? Intimidate them through the grades? They're doing the same thing in middle school. Here are Islamic names where students can choose from. And these are wisdom cards. These are like cue cards. You know, like when you have cue cards in math to memorize your multiplication tables? This is the cue cards to memorize your Islam lesson. And this card is about jihad. I'm going to follow up to what Charles said about jihad being taught in your Newton public schools in here. Now, the word jihad, all of us have heard what the word jihad, you know, is mentioned a lot because every time you hear about a Palestinian suicide bomber blowing himself up, what does he say? He's blowing himself up, fi sabil al-jihad, in the path of jihad. You've got Islamic terrorist organization. Islamic Jihad is the name of the organization. Or al-mujahidun. So obviously jihad plays a major role in terrorism and Islamic terrorism. As a matter of fact, the word jihad is mentioned in the Quran 40 times. 36 times out of 40 as a holy war against the infidels to either kill them or subjugate them. But here's how Michael and Sarah are learning in public school about what jihad is. A jihad is a struggle by Muslims against oppression, invasion, and injustice. So, if these words sound familiar to you, it's because these are the talking points of our enemies. Anytime you hear a Palestinian suicide bomber blowing himself up in Jews, what do they say in their last video? Why are they blowing themselves up? We are fighting oppression. We are fighting injustice. We are fighting occupation. We are fighting invasion. Anytime you hear Al-Qaeda talk about us with their videos, or anybody, enemy who hates us, Islamic enemies from the Middle East, what did Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden used to say in his videos? We are fighting injustice. We are fighting oppression. We are fighting invasion. So now what's happening is we are teaching our students, the talking points of our enemies, paid for by our tax dollars in our public school system nationwide. And you wonder how we got here. You wonder why we have a new generation in our country who are anti-America, anti-Israel, working against our own country from within our own country. You know, Hitler made a very important statement. Hitler said, give me the students, give me the children, and I will change society in 10 years. And he did. So right now, this is what's happening in our country. This course began 25 years ago, quarter of a century. So anybody under the age of 30 right now has been brainwashed by this education. We only woke up after 9/11. And many of you here didn't even know about this. But I'm going to continue following on what Charles said about the exercises they're giving the schools, the students in the school. By the way, they make them recite the Shahada, which is the conversion to Islam. This is public school, by the way. I know we have a lot of pastors here, so I need to share this with you. I'm not going to skip it. Here's what the students have to recite in public schools. Praise be to Allah, Lord of creation, the compassionate, the merciful, King of judgment day. You alone we worship, and to you alone we pray. Remember, this is the same public school where we can't even say we have a Christmas vacation. It's winter break. We can't even sing Christmas hymns. Guide us to the straight path, the path of those whom you have favored, which is the Muslims, not of those who have incurred your wrath, which is the Jews, nor of those who have gone astray, which is the Christians and the atheists. This is what students have to recite in the classroom. And to show you what Charles meant, what he was talking about, here's a class exercise. This is a homework that the kids take home to do. Become a Muslim warrior during the Crusades or during an ancient jihad. Explain weapons, tactics, etc. Really? This is homework? Paid for by our tax dollars in our public schools? You pay those teachers. You pay for that classroom. You pay for those buses picking up students and taking them to class. We are at a time where we need to throw political correctness in the garbage and start calling a spade a spade. I am taking an opportunity here to light a fire under you, not only to educate you, not only to inspire you, but also to light a fire under you to become involved, to become engaged. If you volunteer for 1 hour, volunteer for 10 hours a week. If you give $1 a week, give $5 a week to whatever organizations you are involved in. There are plenty of organizations in this room. Each one of them is worthy of your support. This is the time where we need to come together for the protection of Israel and America, because we are in the trenches together fighting for our life with everybody shooting at us. And by the way, I want to make something very clear to all of you. For those of you who think if we just give them Judea and Samaria, I mean, that's like the stinking part. If we just focus on Israel, all our problems will go away. We heard the same nonsense when they told us, just give them Gaza. If they have Gaza, everything's going to be fine. Israel needs to remain whole. All of it together, one piece, not an inch, not an ounce. Nothing given away to anybody. Nothing given away to anybody. And this is why, when you talk about Israel, you need to talk about all of Israel.
Yes.
All of Israel.
Yes.
And by the way, talking about the Muslim Brotherhood owns and constructed the largest mosque in New England, right here in Boston. And they own it. And they. So here's a couple of questions.
So much to say, so little time.
What can we do in small towns to support this cause and not appear to be anti-Muslim?
Our enemy has perfected the PR war. They're going to call you anti-Muslim even if you don't utter a word about Muslims if you're talking about Scandinavia. Look at me. Do I look like a white supremacist to you? You can't make this stuff up. Do you see my hair? Do I have blonde hair? Do I have white skin? Am I 6 feet tall? Do I look Scandinavian to you? Do I look German? I'm a white supremacist as far as they're concerned. And when you hear them talking about me, I'm a white supremacist, anti-Semite. I mean, you should read the article by the SPLC yesterday, the Southern Poverty Law Center, founded by Jews, by the way. You know, it's amazing. I'm telling you, we're fighting our own. So it doesn't matter what label they strike. The only thing they can do is say words. Words don't hurt you. Keep on fighting. Are you willing to lose your future because what somebody may say about you? What are we, teenagers? When we're teenagers, if somebody said something bad about us, we're hurt. We retreat. We even think about committing suicide. They hate me. Oh my gosh. But you know what? We grow out of it. We continue moving forward. And when we look back and we say, thank God I didn't listen to this stupid teacher who told me I was stupid or I will not amount to anybody or anything. How many of you had people put you down and call your name when you were younger? Many. And look at you now. Me. I mean, they called me stupid. Thank you. Yeah. Me. And look at me today. Can you imagine if I would have listened to their words or let them stop me? I started Act for America, and today we are 750,000 members. Can you imagine if I would have stopped the first time they called me an Islamofascist or an Islamophobe? The New York Times called me a radical Islamophobe when my second book came out in 2008. That was the year I launched my chapter network, 2008. In 2008, I had 35,000 members. Today, I have 750,000 members. Can you imagine if I would have stopped because I did not want to be called an Islamophobe? Every one of you has a purpose, has a reason, has a mission, has a destiny. Get involved, work together, and surround each other with groups just like this. You all need to work together as one. Even though we have different identities and different names, but we all have the same last name. Look at it this way. We're family. Each of us have our unique personality, but we all share the same last name. And the same last name is our cause in the defense of Israel and America and Western civilization. So organize, group together, and work together.
Do you have such a presentation on video? Because we would like to show it to our children.
Yes, I do, actually. We have many presentations on video. If you go to Act for America, you can get a presentation from me on our website, actforamerica.org, or you can just go on YouTube. You don't even need to wait to go to my website. Go on YouTube, Google presentation by Bridget Gabriel. I have a variety of different presentations. There's one about the history of Islam. If you Google Bridget Gabriel Denver, it's 5-part series, you'll be able to come up with that. Many presentations of me at different churches, listen to them. They're pretty much the same. People ask me, or they say to me, maybe I used to think at the beginning, well, they heard it, I spoke about this back there. I shouldn't say it again. But you know what? People don't know, or they don't hear you, or they forget about it. You need to repeat the same thing over and over and over and over and over. So when you hear my presentations, you'll hear pretty much the same type of presentation, no matter what you click on. You'll be able to share something with your kids.
We have sanctuary cities in Newton. What can we do to stop them?
Organize and go against your elected officials and go against your local government. And organize. This is one thing that we do with Act for America, and this is actually something we're going to be doing on steroids, Harry, and everybody, all our chapter leaders, on steroids. Right now, we are organizing nationwide, and we are getting a program where we're going to grow our chapters and start running our own people for local government, for school board, city council, mayors. Can you imagine if you organize in local communities the voting elections? Very few people show up, especially for those city council, state delegates or whatever. Get involved and appoint your own people to run and get everybody in the coalition to go out and vote for them.
What's your plan on how to reach high school kids and college students? What can be done to combat Islamization?
Start talking to your children and your grandchildren. One thing I learned, people don't talk to their kids. And here, especially in the Jewish community. Because people talk to their kids about, oh, did you go see the new movie that came out? Or did you try the new sushi restaurant that just opened up? Yeah. Or did you go see this movie? Or, oh, there's this new whatever. This is what they talk about. And even in the Christian community, they talk about, oh, the mission of the Lord, and we pray before we eat, and we talk, how was your day? And that's it. We don't talk politics around the dinner table. You need to start talking to your children. Your children do not know the facts because you don't talk to your children about politics. So start talking with the kids and have them talk to their friends, and even you talk to their friends. Or even better yet, have a pizza party, especially for the youth. And this is what I loved when you were working with the students back in 2000, 2003, 2004, 2005. I would tell people, get in the high school students, invite them for a pizza party. Kids always are looking for a free meal. Have a pizza party on Sunday afternoon or whatever, some afternoon from 4 to 6 p.m. Get a local band. All the local bands want to play for free. They just want the recognition. Have a pizza party, invite a bunch of kids, invite a band to play, and bring a speaker to teach them about Israel and America. And you can do that in high schools. You can do it in synagogues. You can do it in churches. Pastors who are there Sunday afternoon. It'll be an activity for the youth to do and get educated at the same time.
For 8 years, President Obama did not say ISIS or Islamic terrorism. Why not? He called them ISIL, the JV team.
President Obama didn't know his head from his toe about anything, not just ISIS. President Obama didn't even want to call the terrorists terrorists. Remember, it was man-made disaster, he and Janet Napolitano and all of that stuff. All that nonsense. I mean, we thought the war on terror under George Bush was an oxymoron of a statement. You know, I mean, under Obama, it just went to the other extreme. But it doesn't matter how we identify them, they know who they are. And those of us who know what they are or what our enemy knows, it's up to us to continue speaking and continue being active, and especially meeting with your elected officials and calling your elected officials and picking up the phone about different bills. We, Act for America, have passed almost 100 bills on the state and federal level. 13 bills in Congress and over 80 bills on the state level. And that, thank you. And that's, you know, whether it's FGM or Andy's Law or the Freedom Speech Law, Free Speech Defense Act, See Something, Say Something Act, ALAC, American Laws for American Courts, you name it. BDS, I mean, you name it. So what we do is we send action alerts about a bill coming down for a vote, and we tell you this bill's coming down for a vote. Call and make your voice heard. If you go on our website under advocacy, we have all the high priority bills. With a click of a button, you can read the bill. You can send a letter to your senator, your congressman. We have it very easy for you. All you have to do is enter your zip code. Literally, with a click of a button, you can send them a letter. And here's why this is important. People ask me, what is my voice going to count? I'm only one. My congressman needs to hear from 50,000 people before they listen to anything. Wrong. I talk to elected officials all the time, and I ask them, how many people do you need to hear from to make an issue your top priority? You'll be shocked. You know how many people they need to hear from? 40 to 50 people. That's it. We have more than 40 people in this room. Here is the science behind the numbers. They believe every phone call or a letter or an email is a representative of 1,000 voters. They believe if one person has the energy, like Margot, to make a phone call or write a letter or send an email, he or she are representing 1,000 couch potatoes who are too lazy to make a phone call, but they vote on election day. That translates to 40 to 50,000 voters on election day. Call your elected officials, get involved, sign up to get our emails because we track national security bills. ActForAmerica.org. How many of you here get our emails? Raise your hand. Great, but boy, do we have a lot of you who need to sign up to our email. Promise me when you go home tonight, you will go on actforamerica.org and sign up to get our emails.
The last question is my question, and that is, will you help us make the case of the bias against Christians and Jews in the Newton schools into a national campaign?
Absolutely. 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 We need to work together towards the common goal now more than ever. Under Obama, we were not under attack the way we are now. I would have never thought in a million years that under President Trump we're going to be fighting the way we are fighting right now. So back then, maybe different groups did not work together or they competed or whatever. Right now, I do not want to see any competition. I want to see all of us working together nationwide, getting connected. If you know other groups in other areas and other cities, connect them with us. We have a national network nationwide. We need to edify each other, lift each other up. We may not agree inside the family. We may bicker with each other about nuances of different things, but we need to work as a united front in order to win this war against our enemies.